It's not just radio, it's Rockland World Radio. rocklandworldradio.com.
Greetings, people of Earth. Welcome to the next beast thing. My name is Lex Reibestein. I'm an artist and writer, local here in Rockland County. And some of you know me as Captain Weird. Some of you know me as the Beast. From 2015 to 2017, I was the owner of an art gallery here in Nyack called The Beast with a Million Eyes, and hence the nickname. I hemmed and hawed about doing this until my good buddy, the local artist Tony Zugler, is that it? Had his show going here at Richard Quinn's Rockland World Radio. And he had me on as a guest a few weeks ago. And we had a lot of fun. And most of my friends thought it was very entertaining, but most agreed that due to circumstances beyond my control, maybe I didn't get all my points across. And so, encouraged by Tony, decided to just do this, and here we are. So, brought some goodies from my treasure chest. My original guest, my first guest, was going to be Susan Strange, the ever delightful collage artist, but she took sick. So I'm just going to sort of interview myself. I'll tell you some more stories about me and the things we did at the gallery and what we hope to do in the future. So here we go. Like I said, I grew up right over the hill in Valley Cottage, New York, and I went through the Nyack public school system. And I've been making art and writing fiction and poetry and nonfiction for as long as I can remember. My passion for art and literature, specifically my favorite genres of fantasy, horror, and sci-fi, began with the classic fairy tale storybooks read to me by my parents and grandparents, and a steady diet of comic books brought to my sickbed — I was a very sickly, asthmatic child — by my older brother and hero, Lynn. I guess I got my talent from my dad, and I brought along a picture he did back in January of 1936. And you'll tell me if that's in focus there. Pencil drawing of Father Time. And there's more of a story behind this, but I don't have the other thing you need to see to fully understand this. But if we do another show, we'll show it then. So anyway, just love his lines, and had an effect on me when I was a kid. Good? All right. So anyway, by the age of 10, I knew I wanted to write and or illustrate comics and or books, or maybe even write or direct films. And I spent much, perhaps most of my time pursuing this dream, creating single copy comic books from the sketch pads my gram would supply. And later I would expand my publishing line and write, design, illustrate, and edit single copy monster movie fan magazines. And I have right here, and I bet, I wonder how many of you out there who are artists have one of these. This is my very first sketchbook from when I was a kid. I call it the Pumpkin Book for reasons besides the color of the cover. But I'm figuring I did this stuff in here between the ages of 5 and 7, 1961 to 64. And it's full of drawings and pencil and crayon, and stuff you can imagine, goofy monsters and things like that. Lots of monsters. And in fact, there's a Frankenstein monster. There's another monster. It says monster, too. And specifically, here's Frankenstein, clearly based on the Boris Karloff movie version with his little electrodes in his neck and so on. And it's kind of prophetic because today I'm working on a book about Frankenstein. So you can see my interests don't change much over the decades. And then here's one that I always called The Princess and Her Demonic Escort. And like I said, my subjects don't change much, though hopefully my skill with various implements has. This is a poster I did back in the early 1980s. Beauty and the Beast kind of thing, and still doing it, still refining my technique and so on. So, good? Oh, no, stay. Okay. Okay. So, that, and what else? Anyway, at the age of 9, my work came to the attention of and was critiqued positively by the noted fine artist Thomas George, who had come to settle in Valley Cottage and became friendly with my maternal grandmother, Rosetta Polari, who, as I mentioned on Tony's show, worked and lived at the old post office building downtown Valley Cottage. Mr. George would come in to buy stamps or whatever, and he and my Gram would chat, and inevitably she would mention me and my talents, and finally he agreed to look at my stuff. And this was a kind of a turning point, not so much for the fact that Tom George was a highly respected artist, but because he was the son of legendary cartoonist Rube Goldberg. So while Mr. George's time and consideration and comments were appreciated, the fact that his father was kind enough to do a self-portrait sketch for my grandmother gave both men a great deal of cred in my book. A while back I had the sketch and Tom George's note framed in postal blues with a kind of antique federal building frame. And this is one of my naturally, it's one of my prized possessions. Here's the Rube Goldberg self-portrait.
Okay, next.
And this is the note that Mr. George wrote. And this is a picture of Mr. Tom George.
And who's that?
That's Tom George, the son of Rube Goldberg, who wrote this note and had taken a look at my artwork and had nice things to say and encouragement. All right. So eventually, with the help of a close-knit circle of equally disturbed weirdo friends under the auspices of the high school, I made my little scrapbook magazine into an authentic sci-fi comics magazine called Proteus, with a relatively respectable circulation, which was well received by our classmates as well as some of our professional publishing heroes. At the time, I continued to contribute also to the more traditional school publications and other people's fanzines across the country. And our gang began experimenting with Super 8 film and video and radio comedy programming and running film festivals and art exhibits and mini comic conventions. And this is the time period where my alter ego of Captain Weird was born. I was the captain of the weirdos. We didn't fit into any of the other cliques. We weren't jocks, and the hippies, we weren't cool enough for the hippies, but we were who we were. It's kind of ironic that during this period, every Sunday, I would get up and write and design and illustrate our little club's bulletin. and which was called Cyclops Eye. So I started with one eye and wound up with 1 million of them. And I want to give a big shout out to my old pals from those days, Joe Kepler and Sal Ida and Tom Pye and Gil Chin and Peter Shue and Skip Reed and Glenn Corella. I know you guys are watching this. The Proteus, by the way, the little magazine we used to publish, I've seen on eBay now for $100. Anyway, glad I held on to my copies. We also began buying and selling comics and other collectibles through a mail-order catalog, which I also wrote, designed, and illustrated. And when I graduated in '74, I opened my first fantasy art studio and gallery in association with my fellow artist and classmate, the aforementioned Tom Pye, who is still a great friend and who helped a lot during the life of the Beast Gallery. When our first studio back then didn't work out, we were a little ahead of our time. It was several years before Star Wars and Spielberg and Stephen King made it okay to like science fiction and horror stories. I rejiggered the concept into a more lucrative artsy gift shop called Lex's Rec, which some of you may remember, featuring handcrafted merchandise consigned by local artisans. Both businesses were located in my Graham's old apartment in the old VC post office. Toby Ziegler showed some pictures of what that semi-historical building looks like now when he interviewed me here last week. And it's a shame what has happened. I know a lot of people have great fondness for that building and lots of memories of the post office and my grandparents and various members of the staff and the businesses that we rented it out to after the post office moved up to Route 303 in 1976. If anyone out there has any stories or questions or old photos of life in Valley Cottage in the good old days, I'd love to hear from you and see what you got, because I've been thinking of doing a website or a blog or even a book about such things. My father, Alex, took tons of wonderful local and family pictures with his Leica and Kodachrome starting in the early 40s right up till his death in 1988, and I want to share them in some form or another. And so anyway, get in touch if you have any kind of old stories or questions. I've often said that period from June of 1974 to about February of '76 was probably the happiest of my life. Freed from the suppressive confines of school, I gained a lot of experience in the world of art and commerce, and it was certainly one of the most fertile periods, that's for sure. Tons of ideas started pouring out of me, most of which I've never fully brought to fruition, usually just because of lack of funding. And my partner and best friend, Leslie Powell, has often teased me and suggested that rather than try to accomplish the projects themselves, I should publish these journals of ideas of mine in a facsimile edition. But I think that's pretty whack. But I guess they're pretty interesting. There are all kinds of notes, and they have all kinds of things stuck inside that inspired me. It may have been a postcard, picture out of a magazine, things like that. And then just the ideas I had. Try to go quick so none of you try to steal my copyrights. But you can see the kind of thing I've done all my life, just sticking stuff in there that inspires me and then writing down all my plans. So, also from that period, like I said, there were lots of ideas and drawings that have become favorites among my fan club out there. And so here you have some ink drawings I did back in the 70s. This one is called The Fairest of Them All. And this is her partner, the patron of the arts. And all my life people have been asking and promising that they would buy prints if I ever had them made. So this is going to be the year we're going to have fine quality prints made of these two. You'll be able to buy them separately or preferably as a pair. I think of them as a pair. It's funny that this one in particular, especially guys, but girls too, will look at that picture and no matter, who they are, they'll say, "God, that's my dad." And they never say this is their mom, though. I don't know what that's about. But yeah, so if you're interested, we'll be making prints later in the year, and you can contact me through either Richard here or my website or the blog, and I'll give you the information on that later, or my email. And I'll also be doing prints of another picture, which some of you know, The Perfect Couple, and the Venus DiMaggio. I think you recognize her. This is another big favorite among the people who've been following me all these years. So from 76 to 90, I developed my skills and made many connections while building my portfolio with many illustration and design assignments, and also exhibiting work in various venues around Rockland County. Many credits at the Valley Cottage Library, a stint as associate editor, designer, illustrator for a local entertainment guidebook, which people may remember, called Night Moves. Work at other gift shops and bookstores. A lot of you will remember Linda Rauer's Horse Feathers, and the original Ben Franklin Bookshop, which was run by Stephen and Donna Schwartz in Upper Nyack, and then later taken over by Michael Houghton. A small press, River Run Press in Piermont, also owned by the Schwartzes. And Dorothy Knapp's legendary Antiques Auction House in Congers, which was later run by Helen Seymour. My longest work run was a 25-year turn as researcher, editor, ghostwriter, personal assistant, and archivist to the renowned oceanographic cartographer Marie Tharp. And there she is. I worked in her mansion down on the Hudson in South Nyack, New York. And mostly what I did was I prepared boxes and boxes and boxes and boxes of documents and papers and everything you can imagine, from bus tickets from Tokyo to photographs of the ocean bottom, anything that went into making her famous maps of the ocean floor. And all that stuff that I packed up over the years finally wound up in a special wing in the Geography and Map Division of the Library of Congress. And you can find tons of material about Marie all over the internet, from Wikipedia to the websites of Lamont Doherty Earth Institute and Marie Tharp's Maps website, the company that Marie founded to publish her incredible work. Working for Marie was one of my proudest moments. She was a complete individual. I'm getting choked up. Wonderfully quirky genius, and those of us who lived with her and loved her have story upon story to tell, and perhaps someday we'll put them all down in a book or at least a blog. All we need is encouragement and some backing, and I think we'll do that. We're definitely talking about doing something in honor of Marie. It's going to be her 100th birthday next year. But anyway. In 1983, I assembled a group of other artists and writers. We called ourselves the Square Circle Poets. And we produced 3 issues of a literary journal called Circle. We also met weekly to share our new work and ideas and put together a number of public multimedia performances. And that's when I started my little Pegasus publishing company. We used to originally meet down at Doolittle's Cafe, which is now Pizza Bistro, on South Broadway in Nyack. And anyway, contributors included the late Piper Day. I think many of you know him. He was a street person here, a very gentle soul. Julie Rauer, Linda's daughter. Town psychic Litany Burns. The late Jessica Plotnick. And the late Joe McDowell, who was the head of the art department for Nyack Public Schools and legendary track coach. And the noted science fiction illustrator Janet Alicio. and Christine Jones, now Potter, who has gone on to great success not only as a poet, but as the author of a series of young adult time travel tales. Anyway, all issues were signed and numbered by myself, and I also designed and hand-screened the covers of each issue. And yeah, as you might imagine, there's still copies around, and I'll happily sell you some at like $4 a piece, or all three for $10. And anyway, there was a fourth issue also that never came out. It was the best issue. It was prepared, and it's all the layouts are still there. And I was looking at them recently and thought, it's 35 years this year. Maybe we should publish it. So poetry and art have no expiration date, and if enough of you respond, we'll do it. In the meantime, I'm also preparing a chapbook of my own of some of my best loved verse from that period and beyond. It's called Bemused. It will have a cover by two of my best and favorite assistants from the Beast days, Brett Salvatore and Christine Mateu. And we'll also have limited signed prints of the painting. So I'm taking advanced orders on that too. Again, watch the blog for prices and so on. Anyway, I thought I might read one of my poems, and then you'll decide whether you want to buy the book. This is called Roundelay, and it's from 2004, 5, something like that. Okay. 1. In the shade of the brim of my broad top hat, under my black silk cloak, beneath my big buttoned shirt of bright red, I carry a bird cage, where you have your rib cage. And this morning, from across the fields, upon hearing your eyelids flutter awake, I undid my buttons and reached inside my shirt of bright red. And with my thick thumb and bent pointer finger, I undid the latch. For on hearing your eyelids flutter awake, my caged doves and meadowlarks, my lyrebirds and finches flew into a feathered frenzy, and I could no longer bear to keep them locked in there. 2. I know that far across the fields you can hear their wild wings flapping. Go now then to your evening window, with birdie hands undo the latch, fling wide the sash, and with fluttering eyes offer your face and your arms to them, and to the stars and the moon. 3. They are on their way. They are coming. They are bringing you my song. They will land upon your brow. They will light upon your cheek. They will nestle in your hair like my big birdie hands. They will drop my song into your beaky mouth like a cricket, like a worm. Take it then. Take all of it. Take my song in your sweet, moist mouth. Roll it all around your tongue like a newly plucked fig. Swallow hard. See, it becomes an egg, sliding slug-like down your dewy throat, and it settles inside your rib cage, which is, after all, a bird cage, and it hums my little song, and the birds inside are singing, and their wings are gently drumming, and if you'll reach up, take the dove from your hair, the one that is most like my hand, and lay back down upon your feathery bed, and place the bird upon the nest that rests in the boughs of your white thighs, and let him do my thick thumb's work. Just before the break of dawn, the bird cage will burst open, and oh, how the girl can sing. Anyway, so shortly after the Circle Poetry Journal days, In 1986, my friend Richard Raderman invited me to assist him on a video about Shari Deans, the legendary Hungarian-born artist and doyen of the avant-garde, during a number of visits over several weeks to her home studio in Stony Point, New York. We got Shari to talk about her life and work, examples of which are featured prominently through the film, and she read some of her poetry. And Richard directed and shot the footage, and I was on hand to help in any way I could, choosing some of the settings, angles, questions, etc. I also chose the title, Empress of the Sand of Reason. Later we went into a New York City editing studio, and I helped pick the shots we used and to put them in their sequence. In the end, Richard said my contributions made me assistant director, writer, and editor, and it was a pleasure and an honor to be a part of this project. The resulting film is a definitive character profile of this charming and intriguing cultural icon, and the Shari Deans Foundation art director Barbara Pollitt has always said that ours is the best of the films about Shari Deans. We are now working on enhancing, it was originally shot in VHS, so we're going to digitally reproduce it and get out some of the hiss and enhance the color and so on, and make the video available for streaming and as a limited edition DVD. And some other friends are working on getting it submitted to a film festival or three, so we'll keep you posted on this too, through the blog and Facebook and so on. I wanted to show you a photo that I have that Richard Raderman shot just a couple of years ago. It's done with a very special technique which he kind of stumbled upon, and he's just doing some fantastic work, and we're going to have another show of his sometime this year in some venue or other. But that's Richard Raderman. Good guy. In 1993, I won a short story contest by judged by sci-fi luminaries Ray Bradbury, Robert Bloch, and lifelong mentor Forrest J. Ackerman, which was published in his legendary magazine Famous Monsters of Filmland. A few years after that, I began writing my epic fantasy novel about Captain Weird. Still working on that sucker. It's epic. And a few years after that, I wrote a nasty bit of sci-fi horror called The Simile. We attempted an Indiegogo campaign to get that one published, but I was going through a lot of baloney at the time, so kind of let that drop. But a relaunch is in the works, and there's also an unfinished prequel, The Foreshadowing, in the works. Over the years, I've also worked as an occasional guest host DJ on local internet radio with Tom Donahue and Lou Cannizzaro and others, originally at WDFU in Dobbs Ferry and then at Area 24 in Garnerville. And I've worked for my pal Frank Qualia's Stained Glass Studio in Pearl River, New York. And in 2015, just before we opened the studio, I produced illustrations for this book and two others, fantasy fiction books by Bill Owen, who some of you may remember as the host of a show called Discovery back when we were kids in the 60s, and who is a writer, a writer, does a lot of books on nostalgia, on old-time radio and TV and so on, and has hosted many things on TV and radio, and he's a good friend. And I grew up with his daughter Carolyn, and in 2014 Carolyn, who was an artist and a writer, she had been working on this book for Bill, doing the illustrations, when she died suddenly. And so Bill called me up to finish the job, and I worked from the photos that she had taken for reference for the little boy here. She took pictures of the kid next door where she lived, and so anyway, I did that for Bill, and he asked me to do two other fantasy books at the same time. And this is Carolyn. I don't know, maybe we can put in a little of her singing on here. She was always working on her music as well as her artwork, and she was just this powerhouse, this force of nature, whatever you want to call it. And this was one of her albums, and you can find her on YouTube. There's a particularly wonderful video on there called Dream Big. So anyway, she was one of my great inspirations in life, and at the gallery, and I always felt that her spirit was somewhere around, because we had kind of a psychic connection that we always used to joke about. Anyway, that's Carolyn and Bill, and this is Bill's latest book. As you can see, he does all these things about the good old days of radio and television and films and comics. Should I open it? There's some interesting stuff. He used to do this panel, which appeared, I think, in the old newspaper Grit, and Return with Us Too, and Don Sherwood would do these drawings of the movie stars and so on.
Great.
So, more? Okay. Errol Flynn. I just saw Flash Gordon in there somewhere. Dick Tracy. Cisco Kid. He drew with a very fine line, so some of them are a little hard to fully see, but they're all very interesting and fun. Just looking for Flash Gordon, but I don't know where he went. Good? All right. So, what else? Anyway, from 2005 to 2009, I opened and ran a new art studio up in the Garnerville Arts Center in Garnerville, New York. Though I couldn't sustain it because shortly after I opened Captain Weird's in Magical Fantasy Art Laboratories, Marie Tharp took sick and died in 2006. And without a job, I then worked at the aforementioned glass studio for a while, but then my mother went into decline, and I became her primary caregiver, and this took all my time and energies, and I couldn't keep the job, and therefore I could no longer pay the rent, and I had to give up the studio. And then sometime in 2012, my longtime best friend and business associate, Leslie Powell, a former copy and photo editor and photographer's rep, and I began looking at various potential places in Nyack to set up a new studio with a gallery and retail display space in the front. And we looked at a few dozen places, and we wound up at 79.5 South Broadway in Nyack. And we went back, we saw the for rent sign, and we went back a day or two later and found out it had been rented to this wonderful gal named Gentry Shaney. And what do you know, she was opening an art gallery herself, the Ami Gallery. And in fact, it turned out I was her first customer. And we totally hit it off with Gent and her little family, including her son Dalton, who is the youngest and most loquacious gallery curator on earth. Soon I was exhibiting there and bartering my time there, watching the shop when Gentry was busy with the kids somewhere, and at night I would use the place as an art studio. Then she didn't stay in business very long. She decided to close up shop and return to warmer climes. She was from California and Texas, and I was faced with searching for a new space. So thankfully another shop had just gone up for rent across the street at number 68, and in April of 2018 I opened The Beast with a Million Eyes. People always ask me about the name of the place and what does that all mean. We've been sitting around the dining room table tossing potential names around. You can imagine all the cliches like visions, perceptions, perspectives, POV, and so on. And then my mental encyclopedia of film trivia popped open, and the title of an obscure 1955 Roger Corman cult sci-fi flick, The Beast with a Million Eyes, popped out of my mouth. And Leslie looked at me like I was crazy, but then she asked me to repeat it, and I could see the wheels turning in her head, and she said, yeah, maybe. Then we tried it out on friends, and the reaction was always the same. They'd say, what? And then they'd think about it and say, yeah. So for me, the beast was a metaphor, not unlike the creature in the film, for the spirit of the arts that all artists channel. There's millions of us with millions of perspectives, philosophies, and ideas, and the fact that it came from a sci-fi monster flick, my favorite genre, and one that came out of the whole low-budget DIY world of independent, almost underground filmcraft cinched it for me. People who got it loved it. Some people, of course, just thought it was dumb or somehow blasphemous. Ultimately, I think it was absolutely perfect. The name, in addition to our sometimes mysterious, fantastical, and whimsical window displays and promotional flyers, delighted and or irritated everyone who saw them, and it definitely brought the curious passers-by into the store. So from April 2015 through October 2017, we mounted over 20 month-long exhibits by over 50 artists, mostly local talents, many of them emerging or underexposed, and who said that their experience with the gallery was an empowering pleasure and a thrilling opportunity. Artists included Richard Raderman, Nancy Qualia, Dave Copperman, Hildy Borkowski, Victoria Bertotti and her mother Luisita, Elizabeth Ladwig, Leslie Haynes, Grover Chapman, Dan White, Star Blossom Goddess, Tave, Drew Merlo, Artemisia, Kate Cahill, Barbara Adams, Louis Spitz, Ray Lagstein, so many of you. I'm just thanking you all here. You were all great to work with and to get to know. We had shows on outsider art, pin-up art. That show featured my young assistant Paige Blinn, and this is one of her works. It wasn't in the show, this is from later, but we showed Paige's pin-up work, and she actually staged a live pin-up shoot with one of my models, Carolyn, whose name I can never pronounce, sorry, but last name. Anyway, that was great fun. It was in the middle of February. It was freezing cold, but the place was packed solid, and it got hot. And we're hoping to do another pin-up show in the future with Paige again soon. We had shows on masks and contemporary Australian Aboriginal art and vintage toys. And this is the poster. Oops. It's not gonna, I guess I'll hold it up. This is one of the posters from one of the Aboriginal. We had two art shows on Aboriginal art from Australia, with from the collection of Michelle Arminati and Jerry Viant. And this poster was designed by my extremely talented assistant Mikey Villarosa. Great shows. Should I show you the other one that's behind it? This was from the later show. Again, I believe Mikey designed this for me. From details from those paintings. Very proud to have done those shows. Once a year, I wanted to kind of give back to the community I grew up in and the school I went to, and we would hold an annual tribute to the artistic legacy of the Nyack Public Schools. And we featured so many great artists, the late Carolyn Owen, who I've already mentioned, and Tom Pye, and our good friend Caroline Zagart, um, Liz Sales, who was in my class and went on to become a world-class children's book illustrator, and her father, William Sales, who was also a great illustrator. Mark Patnode, also from my class, who has gone on to be a great landscape painter whose work has appeared in the White House. Jacqueline Mahan, who had been a teacher at Nyack and is also an author of horror novels and does some great horror stuff, which we've shown right here at the Nyack Village Theater as well. James Oursler and his pretty famous brother Tony Oursler, who both went to Nyack High School, and the late Joe McDowell, who was our hero, our great teacher, among many others. And we also hired about a dozen young artists over those almost 3 years, extraordinary talented young people, most of whom still think working there was one of the best jobs they'd ever had. So here's a shout out to Morgan Zelmer, Brett Salvatore, Christine Mateu, Mikey Villarosa, Kat Cancho, Paige Blinn, Casey Jacobs, Vanessa Reyes, and Renee Jen DeBlanc, and Olivia Mendelson. All did great jobs, and was very happy to show their work as well. We also hosted a number of wonderful musicians, Dave Copperman and Noah Behrman, Brett Salvatore, the multi-talented again, and Casey Jacobs, Levi Matza, the late great Doc George, and Melissa Haggerty. While I'm name dropping, I want to thank my great friend Stu Sobel for all your printing and promotional needs, not to mention Comic Relief, which I won't mention. Catherine Hames, my lifelong friend who designs and maintains the Beast website, and for lots of help in business and soul support, Leslie Powell, Deborah Bartolotta, Scott Bandreamer, Ian Prastian, Liz Gott and Mark McGuy, Kate Cahill, Frank Mancioni and Al Longobardi, Janet Wharton Dyke and David Nielsen at the Hook magazine, and my former landlords Joe Neves, Cody Van Kampen, and Gene Reed. Doc George called the Beast one of the 3 best things about Nyack. I know that one of the other things was this place right here. Some of what we accomplished over the first 2 years can be viewed at www.beastartnyack.com, and you can also check out my website, Captain Weird's World, 2018.blogspot.com. I'm also on Patreon and Buy Me a Coffee. And anyway, after we closed the shop, our good friend Richard Quinn smelled an emergency, as he put it, and he has been a great help to us ever since. And he has let us do some shows here. We've had the wonderful caricature artist Dan Springer here. We had Jacqueline Mahan back. We had Brett Salvatore back. And like I said, in March we're going to have Susan Strange. And we've also been running what I call the Mainstream Underground Film Series with Richard's Super Secret Film Society, and shown a lot of my old favorite horror films. And I'm sorry?
Full moon.
Oh yeah, the full moon. We're gonna every month at the full moon we're gonna be showing a werewolf classic, and so we just had one a couple of weeks ago, and another one will be coming up. So give Richard a call or send him a note and find out what the schedule is, or I guess you can pretty much go by the calendar. This weekend. Right, this weekend on March 2nd at 7:30 in honor of Carnival, we have Marcel Camus' classic Black Orpheus, wonderful music fantasy from 1959. It's the film that brought Brazilian music, the bossa nova and so on, to America, and made it such a big thing all over the world, actually. Got some other artists lined up for shows. Our musician Levi Matza, his mother Rachel, is going to have a show, and I'm going to be doing some stuff with Tony Ziegler, and hopefully we're going to have a show on Haitian visionary art and another show of a collection of vintage Japanese prints. So we're looking for a space to be more permanent, and it's something to ask around about. And if you know of any place, let us know. We're going to do these as pop-ups to begin with, but hopefully eventually we'll be back on our feet and can do a real place again more permanently. So that's about it. We're also coming out with a newsletter, which will be in both real paper form, and because I still like that stuff, and it'll also come as an email if you want it. And that'll be called the Eyes Wide Sheet. So that's it. You can write to me at captainweird1@gmail.com, and check out our website at beastartnyack.com, and tell me what you think of this stuff. I guess, did you get the paintings in, or do you want to? These are some of my works. We'll close out with that, I guess, from the past few years. This is called Solar Storms over Tombstone, and I have a very bad habit of subtitling my paintings. It's called subtitle is Phoenix on the Half Shell, though maybe that should be Bombshell. It's from a series I called the As Above, So Below series, and this is done entirely in fluorescent acrylic, and Richard tells me it's pretty bright right now, but you should see it under a black light. If anyone's interested, it's I think I originally had it at $1,600, but since this is our grand opening program, I don't know, I could take a discount on that. We can talk. And then over there, those are also fluorescent acrylics, and they're from my series, well, I call all my fluorescent pieces, I called the technique efflorescence, but it's from a series called Atmospheres, where I took various human emotions, such as lust and rage, and these two are both called rage, and I combined them with the appropriate mythological figure. So the one on the left is the rage of Cerberus, and the one on the right is the rage of the Minotaur. So make of them what you will, but there they are, and they too are for sale. I guess I would take about $200 for each. So there you have it. I will see you at the Garnerville Arts Center annual members exhibition, which opens on March 9th. I know Susan Strange is going to have a piece there, and Rachel Matza also, and I'm sure many of my other friends, and I will have a piece up there. So that's it. I hope you've gotten something from this, and if you tell me so, and I do appreciate it, we will do it again. All right. Thanks, and take care.
It's not just radio, it's Rockland World Radio. rocklandworldradio.com.